Well, good morning. It's Thursday. I don't know what day it is. What is it? June the 1st? May the 31st? Who knows? Anywho, it's Thursday. So here's what I'm doing today. I'm starting on the rear brake lines. Now this rear end is out of a Mustang. Just happens to fit perfect. And in the Mustang, it has disc brakes with two flex hoses because the Mustang had anti-lock brakes. It has a fitting there that looked just like this when I cut the line. So here's what I'm doing. I'm going to mount this hose, let's see if I can do it with one hand, up here like this. It's out of the way of the tire, got some good flex to it. Obviously the rear end doesn't go up and down a foot, it can't go down much further. So we'll get that moving. Look at that spider doing a dance, can you see that? I don't think he's real happy with me this morning. Yes, that is a spider. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and make some little lines, adapter lines. Ooh, it's a skater. That's what it is. Obviously caught in a spider's web. That's one of those, I don't know what they are. They're nasty. Now he's dead. So, moving on. Sorry, PETA. I ain't that much of a fan of bugs. I don't think bugs are considered animals. So, here we go. So, what I did was, this is the original line with the original fitting. As best you can see. What I'm going to do is I'm going to double flare the other end, and I am going to take the fitting that I just removed from the original block on the rear end of the Chrysler. I'm going to put it on here. Where are we? Here we are. Like that, and double flare. I have a double flaring tool. That way, I can use my new line. I can bring them together to the block, and forward we go. So that's how that's going to work out. It should. Let's see what happens. Remember I told you about building in a beautiful, nice shop a few videos ago, and how they make it look so beautiful and perfectly clean and all? Well, this is one of my Wilwood brandy new rotors after sitting in my barn for a few months on the car. So what I had to do was just spin it up with a real light sandpaper. Then I'll just give her a spin. And yeah, it's gonna look just like the disc brake rotor on your mother's car after it rains out front. They have rust. There's nothing you can do. It's steel, it's clean, it rusts. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and start putting the disc brake calipers and all on. I didn't put those on earlier because I didn't want everything to rust up. I retained the original, I don't know if you can see it, the original bracket right here, so I can put my Wilwood brake hose right here and then go ahead and run it to my brake block right here and right up to my master cylinder. So we'll be doing that. Of course, I do have an adjustable proportioning valve for the rear brakes. So I will hook the front brakes up and then do the rears with a single proportioning valve to the back. So that's the plan. So we'll start on that. As I have problems, I'll film it. Well, there's one. I did have to take it apart a couple times. You have to, despite the fact that you buy all this stuff as a kit from Speedway, you still have to shim so that the brake caliper is centered on the rotor. So I had to take it apart and put a shim in right here between the caliper and the caliper bracket. And I used my Wilwood brake lines, put a loop in them, and they all have clearance. Now I'll go ahead and do the other side, and then I'll make my front brake lines. We're getting closer to being able to stop. It still won't go, but it'll stop. Kind of a good idea, I think. So, onward and upward. We'll get back with you in a few minutes. Well, you've heard me talk about junk before. Here we go again. So Speedway Motors has these spindles specially machined for them so that you can use a Wilwood brake caliper or a regular GM caliper. If you look at this side, you will notice that right here I had to put a shim. Now I put that shim in so that the caliper itself, if I can get it exactly square here, let's see, is centered. I don't know how well you can see that, but the rotor is centered. So, making the assumption, once again we know how that word works, I went ahead and I put this side together with the exact same spacer in the exact same place. And when I put this one together, can you see how far off that is? See the gap on that side? Now look at the gap on this side. Well, you really can't see it. But this side doesn't need a spacer. Now, that's not a real big deal. It's only, oh, I don't know, 125 thousandths difference. So you would think that they could at least get a machine so that they were reasonably the same. The rotor castings, I'm sure that Wilwood does a much better job as far as their castings. But this is once again one of those ridiculous things that we have to put up with. Using thread locker, having to pull it all apart again, take the spacer out, put it all back together. This one doesn't take a spacer, that one does. It's ridiculous. Once again, it's so tiring, this bullshit you have to put up with. Well, I don't know if you can see it, but I took the, I don't know why it tries to do that. I took the washer out, and sure enough, it's dead centered now. So, isn't that crazy? It's irritating. So, as you noticed, or as I showed you before, we have a little issue with no front suspension. And when I say no front suspension, I mean these springs are so stiff that you cannot bounce it at all. So, the only way to cure that is to take some spring out of it. Now, I really have no idea of what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do is take out the two bottom springs. Now, is that going to do anything? I don't know. It's got to help, because every one of these with the arc stiffens it up a little bit more. So we're going to give it a shot and see what happens. By the way, if any of you are wondering why my thumb is all scarred up, that's why you need to be paying attention to drive belts and fan belts. Caught it in a fan belt on a go-kart when I was just a kid. Buddy of mine driving a go-kart, I'm hanging onto the roll bar in the back, fiddling around with something, I don't know. Anyway, he went to go race a mini bike, slowed down and stopped. I stepped off, forgot to let go of the roll bar. Went flying forward and my thumb went through the belt. Long before the lawsuits where everybody got rich quick schemes. So years later, I happened to be working at a boat dealership, and one of our boat washers was a beautiful girl, and I'm talking drop dead gorgeous, beautiful model. She was just washing boats so she could get a tan and get paid for it in between modeling gigs. Imagine that. So I didn't give it much thought, but one day we're talking and she asked what happened to my thumb, and I told her, and she said, oh, look at this. She pulled her hair back in the front and she had just the minorest of stitches across the front of her head underneath her hairline. Apparently what had happened was, on a go-kart, she was riding it, hair flailing in the wind. Belt grabbed a hold of it and peeled her scalp back. She sued and gets $65,000 a year for the rest of her life. She was 21 at the time, and that was 30 years ago, close to 30 years ago. So the differences was, my folks, you just get things fixed. Now everybody's so sue happy. She'd go through the money in 6 months and then have to work the rest of the year doing modeling or whatever just to pay the bills because she pissed it all away. Good morning, everybody. It is Friday, June the 2nd. We're gonna see if we can't get some stuff done today. We had some issues, needed more fittings, making another mess over here, which I'm really good at lately because I'm so spread out. When you're out of parts, you just start going and grabbing and starting something else, and well, you end up with a mess like this. Got electrical over here, flare, double flare fittings over here, and a whole bunch of stuff here. So here's what I'm doing today. Today, I'm working on brake lines, fuel lines, and electrical. We'll see how far we get. So I've got my bulkhead fitting here. It's nice and dark. And you see it, there it is. For my fuel tank, which comes out of here. This is underneath the trunk, if you will, if you want to call it a trunk. And that comes out. It's going to head up around that side and over. I've got my main battery cable. I have gone ahead. This is really tough when it's so light out there. I have to do something with this, but I do have a grommet there where it goes in. The battery will be here. I've run that line forward. I have my factory Mustang brake line brackets mounted up to the frame rail here. And then they are going to go to a T up here and one line to the front that way. So there's fuel, electrical, and brakes. I'm also going to get my differential cover gasket put on, get that filled with Posi Lube. I'm going to put I do have the drive shaft sitting up in there, but it's not bolted in yet. Get that done, get it bolted in. Try and get this bottom end done today. If I can do that, I can get her down closer. I have also removed the 2 short leaves for each side in the front suspension. So now it's down to a 4-leaf. And I'm hoping that that's enough to get it a little bit softer in the front. And we'll just continue on. So that's the plan for the day. I'm gonna get started. Gonna make these videos shorter because I've got a lot to do and editing takes a while, even though I'm not much of an editor. So away we go. I'll get back with you every once in a while, show you progress. Quick question for all you guys out there that are using GoPros. Do you have any problem with leaving a battery in overnight and then you come out in the morning and it's dead? I had one down to 9% last night. The other night I had one that actually went down to 0. I don't know if that one's going to charge back up. We'll see. But it's like anything that's Bluetooth. All of a sudden connects to it and I'll hear it beep in the middle of the night and turn on. So if anybody has any hints other than yank the battery, let me know. It's a pain when you pull the battery out overnight. Then you've got to reset the date every time. Alright guys, remember when I said plan ahead, plan ahead, plan ahead? Look, this is the bracket originally for the proportioning valve that came with this master cylinder. So I have a line lock there and my adjustable rear brake proportioning valve. And I went ahead and drilled a couple holes here to mount the line lock. Used an existing hole here. And that bolts right there, just like that. Let me get it bolted up real quick and I'll show you another shot of it. And there you have it. Now I've got plenty of clearance against this pipe because this pipe can't move unless I get hit in the front. And if I do, who cares about line lock? Obviously I'm stopped. So my rear proportioning line can come out right through here, right around to the back and go down. The inlets come up here and up here, and my adjustment is right here. Everything is safe. It's in a great spot. It should work excellent. So that's the plan. Now I'm going to go ahead and run a rear brake line, finally. Well, here's a view of one spot in the car that's not rusty. So what I've done is I went ahead and took the original steel brake line from the Mustang. I cut it. I put a double flare and another fitting on it so that I can attach it to a T-fitting and put it up in here. So what I'm going to do is we'll get it all started. We'll put her about where I'm going to want it, which is right about there. Grab my 13mm for the Mustang and tighten it up. I'm leaving this loose for right now so that I can get everything lined up and in. Now I have not clamped this main line to the front of the car as of yet because we obviously are going to have some adjusting to do. Now if you can see what I'm doing, I'm bending this so that I can actually aim for the other side. And then I need to make a fitting for the other side as well. So then from there, as you can see, I'm going through the frame, which I will take care of and make sure it doesn't touch. And I've got clamps to hold it in line. I come out of the frame, I go forward, and then I come up into here, which I'll bring up to my proportioning valve. So the next step is to clamp everything up, make my other rear brake line, and then the rear brakes are done. I still have to do something with the emergency brake. I'll give you an idea how much longer even a Mustang is. This is a Mustang emergency brake cable. And if you've ever looked at a 2004 or that era Mustang, you know that the emergency brake is right behind the shifter next to your seat. Well, this one I could actually mount on the firewall because they go almost all the way up there. So it's about a foot shorter there too, maybe more. So I'll finish up these rear brake lines, get them all buttoned up, show you again, keep going forward. All right, so after a long day of screwing around and going to town and getting fittings and all, we have got some brake lines. I've gone ahead and mounted that one, and I went ahead and ran it all the way across the cross member above the rear end by the shocks. It goes to a T. Where's the T? Well, I'm looking at the front of the camera trying to stay out of the way. There's the T. And it goes to this one. And it goes down around the front. Comes down around. Goes through a hole in the frame, which I will set my clamp so that it touches nothing in that hole. Because that's the way you're supposed to do it. So it won't have a chafe spot. It comes back out on the other side. Goes all the way down the frame rail on the outside. Goes back up through and around and up to the two check valves, which then go up to the line lock and the proportioning valve. Comes down in the front to the front brakes, goes across over top of the end, right to the front brake here, to the Wilwood caliper. The other side is bent around the back side of the cross member and goes around to the other side brake. The reason I did it on the back and not around the front, because it would have been real nice, is because there's a pulley right there. And if I sling a belt, which is very possible, I don't want the belt taking out my brakes. It'd be a bad idea. So all I have to do is plumb one line. How well this will work. From here, which is the master, down to here, which is the line lock for the front brakes. One line. I have the line. It's actually right here. I had to cheat because I don't have the fitting to go into the master cylinder. I could have bought the fitting. I would have had to buy 9 of them, because that's, don't ask me why, 9 come in a package. Instead, I bought this line, which has the fitting on that end, the right fitting on this end, and I painted it copper. So will you notice it? Probably not, but just know that you can mess with me about that brake line. I did have enough copper line to go ahead and make it, but in my lifetime I will never use up the rest of those 9 fittings, so there's just no sense buying them. So, and this was so cheap. It's the right length, it does everything I need, so what the heck. No one will ever know, except for everybody that watches this video forever. I have it hanging here just for the paint to dry. I'm using tape and a clamp to hold it. Works good. So that'll about do it for this video. We will come back tomorrow morning. I'm going to have myself a nice cold adult beverage or 3. And tomorrow I'm going to do the fuel system. I have all the stuff to do the power now. I can make my other ground cables, all that stuff. There's a very good possibility that this is going to spit fire tomorrow. Stand by. Okay, so I've got my bulkhead fitting for my fuel line set up. I've also got my place where the grommet is going to go for the positive battery cable. Battery cable will mount to the battery in here in a battery box. And then behind that would be my tire squirters. Woohoo! And then around the front, I have also mounted my coolant overflow bottle, recovery bottle, which is in a real good place. If you look, it's out of the way. I can do everything with it. There's obviously no place to mount it up here, so it's higher than the radiator cap, which is fine. Gravity works really well. And then it'll discharge out just pretty much straight down. So hopefully we'll never have to use it and won't have any problems, but we do have one. And my evaporator will go right next to it over here. Or evaporator. My receiver dryer. And away we go. I've pretty much got her buttoned up as far as the front. I do have the belts on. This one's a little bit on the tight side. I've got a twist in it. But I've got to get it untwisted, but first I got to get the motor to turn over. I got to pull pulleys and I don't want to do that. So we'll fiddle with that in a while. Well, there she is. She got a little droop to her underneath. It could actually go up another inch, but there's nothing I can do. If I go up the inch, it's going to hit the clock, so it wouldn't have fit in the hole properly anyway. But I moved it all over an inch, so now I have much better clearance to the header pipe. I actually, before I did that, I checked to find out how tight I can run my U-joints, and they say 35 degrees. So I have hooked it up, and when I turn the wheel, it works. And it's as bound as it's going to get, which is just about 30 degrees, maybe a hair less. So we're all good. It clears. We have clearance. Now I've got to adjust the steering box. I'm going to finish the wiring today. It's supposed to rain later. I figure if I finish the wiring, I can close the front end, and then I'll get under it and I'll run my brake lines from the back to the front. I can do my front brakes, run my fuel lines, get all that stuff ready, fill all the fluids, the differential, the transmission, put the drive shaft in, and then we're really getting close. Fingers crossed, the next couple days we're gonna bring it all together. Still looks awesome, doesn't it?